Digital transformation is one of the most talked about concepts in the business community. Most of the conversations focus around the pros and cons of various software solutions, or in many cases, simply the need for companies to digitize more of their operations. We don't often hear much about the back end of digitization. What's happening further upstream that's powering all of our applications? Although we might not be aware of it, there's a lot happening in the cloud. And one company that few outside of the tech sector have heard of is a driving force behind this. I'm Jane Singer, and thank you for taking the time to join me here on A Seat at the Table, where we talk to leading executives, entrepreneurs, and innovators who share their insights, experience, and outlook on business, technology, and leadership. It's wonderful to have you as part of our international community that now spans over 100 countries. Today I'm speaking with Daniel Au, Vice President for Regional Enterprise Sales in Asia Pacific for Red Hat. Red Hat is a software company that supports open source development and delivers any application on any cloud, anywhere. The Red Hat Hybrid Cloud Console gives users the content, tools, and visibility to deploy applications quickly across clouds. The Red Hat Hybrid Cloud Console gives users the content, tools, and visibility to deploy applications quickly across clouds. In this episode of A Seat at the Table, Daniel talks about why open source is more advantageous for companies than closed source software, opportunities for mid-sized companies to use open source platforms to develop proprietary applications, and what's next for cloud-based software solutions. Before we get started, if you're a supply chain executive who'd like to finally put an end to information overload and get a concise, fact-based summary of key market developments and shifts, as well as sharp insights into what's likely to impact sourcing in the coming months, then the current situation in sourcing is exactly what you're looking for. To learn more, head on over to thecurrentsituation.net. That's thecurrentsituation.net, where you can get all of the details. And of course, the links will also be in the show notes. Now let's sit down with Daniel and learn about the opportunities for companies using open source platforms. I'm really happy to have you on the show, Daniel, because technology is such an interesting area, and particularly now there's so many things happening, so many new developments, and Yep. we don't normally get to touch upon things that are the likes of what Red Hat is doing. So I think it's really interesting to be able to sit down with you and learn a little more about what you're doing and how it's benefiting many, many people who are trying to enhance their cloud-based applications.
Yeah, I think it is really interesting. Even for me as well, I have just joined Red Hat not too long ago. The last company I worked for, 23 years was in different parts of Hewlett Packard. And I kind of knew open source. I thought I knew open source until you join Red Hat, and you really come into contact not just about the technology, but also the entire culture that the company is built upon, because Red Hat is a flag bearer of the open source movement, globally.
Right. Now, maybe you could explain a little bit about why it's more advantageous for customers, for people using a system, to have an open source software product rather than closed source.
Yeah, so the so-called closed source is kind of the proprietary software. You just imagine if you buy a vehicle, and then you are not allowed to open the hood of your vehicle as you drive it. And then if something happens, along the road, and it's like, okay, the car stalled. And then you try to open the hood to find out what's happening and what's causing the stall. And you can't because the hood is closed. That's kind of the analogy of, closed source application, because you do not know what the source code is. So what do you mean by open source is that the source code of the applications that you use, including the operating system, which is the Red Hat Enterprise Linux, is open. You are able to see all the source codes, the millions of lines of source code that forms what we call the kernel of the operating system itself. And you are free to make any modification you want in open source. And then after the modification that you made, if you create into what we call an executable code, you can distribute it yourself, right?
Oh, nice.
So there's no restriction in that. But what's also very beautiful about open source is about sharing and the whole sense of community development. It really drives what we call innovation. So, and we kind of leverage what we call the strength of the community, where hundreds of thousands or even millions of people coming together to work on a single project, contributing their ideas and building up, the source code. And what Red Hat does, is participate it very heavily in the community, and at the same time look at the different projects that are in open source, and then help out in two different ways. One is what we call building up the user interface, because whatever, in terms of software that's in the community, they don't really bother about building very good user interface so that it can easy to use. So firstly, we adapt what we call the ease of use. And the second thing that we do is we do quality assurance and integration to provide stability to the application itself, the source code itself, before we release it out as a Red Hat version, of the software. Yeah. So that's what's really exciting about it. But what's, amazing about open source is that it drives what we call rapid iteration.
Okay.
So every customers or every developer is able to contribute, and it drives also innovation because everything is open and shared with everyone. Just imagine, when we were kids, we were told you should share, you should learn from other people around you.
Right.
And if things are closed, everyone has to start from, step one, right? But if you are open and you share with everyone what you have learned, you have moved kind of to step 10. The next people who come they start from step 10 and then build upon what the success of others and continue to evolve, what has been already built. And what also is really exciting about that is that it drives also adoption of the software. One of the major issues is that you have a nice innovation, but nobody knows about it. Nobody, can kind of contribute to it, and nobody's using it, right? But in open source, the community is built upon interest on solving certain problems that's out there in the world, technology problems. And then people come together from all walks of life, different companies, and then they start contributing in those communities to build this, what we call open source projects. Yeah, and there are millions of them out there. Yeah.
Right. Can you give us some examples of popular open source projects that people might be aware of but they didn't realize it was an open source project?
Well, the most popular open source project today is the Kubernetes is open source project, right? So Kubernetes was developed by Google, and then Google could have kept it to themselves, but what they have done is they've open source Kubernetes, right? And then and that allow different companies to come in to collaborate. And Red Hat was one of the early collaborators in that project itself. And what happened, for example, in the recent years, Microsoft, as they launched Microsoft Azure, they also started to open source what they call the .NET framework, which was proprietary to them. And it was interesting, Microsoft thought that, they've done everything that, they could to innovate. But when they open source it, they was very surprised that community could contribute additional innovation to what they have already done. Because imagine, right, if it's closed source or proprietary, you depend only on your own employees, your investment in your research and development to do the innovation of what you have created in terms of software. But once you open source it, you leverage the strength of the world, the strength of all the developers out there, globally. And that's where the power of innovation and the power of communities come into play.
So then if a project is open sourced, if you were to start a project, then you open source it, then you no longer have the proprietary rights to it, would you? It would then become everyone can contribute to it, but at the same time, everyone could access it and use it. Is that correct?
That's correct. So you don't own it, but then you also get to get the wisdom of other people to build upon what you have started. And that's where you collectively build a better application and software out of the open source project itself. And at any time, you can take that, right, lock that down, and distribute and make different version of it yourself. Yeah.
And then that different version you would be distributing within whatever uses you wish, within your company or for your customers or whatever you want.
You can close source that if you want to, and then sell it. But, in a Forbes article that I read once, Red Hat probably is the only company in the world since the past until now that has really built a successful business model distributing open source software. The other companies that has been successful mostly took what has been built in the community and in open source and deliver to the businesses as a service, like software as a service. So for example, like the likes of Amazon, AWS, they do contribute quite a bit in open source and take what's in the open source project, bring it into their cloud itself, but then they close the hood and then they deliver it as a service to all their customers, and customers will not know what's under the hood. But that is what we call software as a service delivery model. The difference is that the Red Hat model is called open source, where you're still able to see the codes, and we actually sell it as a subscription of the actual software itself. And you get to see the source code, and you get to contribute also to future releases of whatever we actually launch and sell.
Right. So in other words, people would subscribe to Red Hat. It would enable them to access this entire open source platform, and then they can contribute, and they can also use any of that for themselves.
Okay, so anyone can have access without even subscribing to Red Hat.
Okay.
Because that's the open source community. So you have access to the source code as long as you participate in the community. So what Red Hat does is take what is in the community, what we call upstream, and then we do quality assurance, we do the bug fixes, we create new, better user interface, and then we launch and lock down a version and sell it to our customer. The subscription gives the customers a couple of things. And one of the key things that the subscriptions give to them is what we call the ability to have technical support. But more importantly, it also provides them security resources. We do, we search through the open source codes and we find security vulnerabilities, and then we launch, additional patches to patch those security labs. At the same time, the version that Red Hat kind of locks down and distributes, with the subscription, you could also have access to Red Hat's partner ecosystem, because the software doesn't work alone; it works with the partners. So, for example, then the partners will also build things on top of what Red Hat has locked down, right? So then what we do is we have what we call supported lifecycle. Every version that we launch, let's say version 9, where we just launched it, we actually have a 10-year life cycle. So you can kind of use Red Hat's open source software, and you decide I don't want to upgrade, and you can choose to do that. But if in proprietary software, you are forced to actually upgrade when a new patch comes out, right? So you can stay where you are, and we will guarantee you that we'll support it for the next 10 years. But of course you are not able to kind of access new features and other things, right? But you will be able to really lock down, on the version that you want. And you can actually stop the subscription of course, when the contract ends. And what happened is that after that, when the subscription ends, you have the right to keep the software.
Right.
We don't go around saying, okay, you have to delete it away because you are no longer subscribing to us. The only thing that you don't get is once you stop the subscription, you don't get the support, you don't get the security patches, you don't get the new releases and everything that we do on top of it. So what happens in this model is that it actually also forces Red Hat to continually innovate and deliver value to the customer. Because if they decided, hey, I don't like your innovation anymore, I'm not going to subscribe to your software or the things that you're doing, I'll just keep whatever you have created. And that's up to me, and I can distribute it as well if I want to. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think one thing that a lot of people have noticed is that a lot of software switched to being SaaS-based, right? Which meant that you had to continually pay for it. And at the same time, a lot of the upgrades and things weren't necessarily useful for every user, right? I mean, they're not saying they weren't useful, but it might be something that is a great idea, but we just don't do that in our business, so you wouldn't really need it. But yet you're forced to continually upgrade through that. So I think what Red Hat is doing, giving people that option, is quite interesting.
Yes. Correct. Yeah, I think choice is the key thing, and you're absolutely right. In the past, remember the days when you buy a software from an IT shop, you install it
Right,
into your computer and say, I'm not going to upgrade to the new version because
right,
I'm happy with the current one, right? Because the new one require better hardware, so you have to
right.
upgrade your notebook or your PC just because of the new version, and that's tough because you are now in a SaaS model, you're more or less kind of forced to do it. But on the other hand, of course, in the SaaS model, things are becoming lighter in the way they deliver the applications. And even software vendors are, of course, also innovating to see, how do you break down into different ways of doing that. Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree. Some are going to hear this and think, you TDP. But hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
Yeah, it's really interesting that it's been sort of more accessible to people at a level that typically it wasn't, right? I mean, previously you just had an application that did exactly one thing and that was it. And now it's gotten to the point where a user can actually customize it at that very root level, so to speak.
Correct. And one of the key things, right, that Red Hat's really started is what we call the Linux operating system, or we call RHEL, or Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And if you look at the operating system, what is the purpose of the operating system? It acts as an interface, between the applications that runs on top and the infrastructure or the hardware that runs below. Right. And if the operating system is kind of closed, let's say I'm a new hardware developer. I want to create something really exciting and I want to be able to run on this operating system or interface so that application can use it. But if it's closed, it really depends on the proprietary owner of the operating system to build those drivers to support whatever hardware innovation is being built. But because now Linux is open source, hardware vendors can have access to the source code and also collaborate of how do you interface better so that applications that are built on top, will be able to integrate, end to end from infrastructure to application. And that also drives a lot of innovation within the technology space of coming out with new products, and new innovation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It seems that Red Hat is designed to sort of sit on top of or run alongside IBM's cloud services. Is that the case?
Well, I would say not just IBM, it's all cloud services. So Red Hat has the concept of what we call open hybrid cloud. And we also have the concept, our purpose in Red Hat is to help customers build better applications. That's number one. And second, to manage application easily across different platforms, whether you decide to do it in what we call a bare metal environment, virtualized environment, on-premise, in one cloud, or in different clouds. So we also have the concept of once you build the application once, you can run it anywhere you want, whether in your own data center, whether in Amazon Cloud, whether it's in Microsoft Cloud, or even IBM Cloud. So the key thing about open hybridness is no login, right? You can move and run the application anywhere you want, similar to the concept around open source and open communities. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. That's a lot of flexibility.
Yes. And that's what, I think a lot of customers and even, at individual level, that's what we want. We don't want to be locked down into any single vendor, but the ability to bring what we have created into any environment that we want. The last thing you want is that if you, decided not to move from one cloud provider, you want to move to another, you have to rewrite your entire applications again. And also that your application could be running slower, or you need to do modification to your applications. And that's what we want to help our customers to prevent what we call lock-in and proprietary.
Right. So is Red Hat really more designed for very large corporate use, more enterprise use? Or is it also applicable for mid-sized companies?
Yeah, it is applicable for all sizes of company. What Red Hat does is to create the platforms to allow customers to build their application on top. Of course, we have what we call the Red Hat Linux, Enterprise Linux, which is the operating system that runs on all kinds of infrastructure and in all the clouds. But what's also, one of the key things that's happening in the market today is the lack of application developers and the lack of talents,
Oh,
So
really? Wow.
I think it's not, it's not that the software is impeding people from using Red Hat products or solutions or software. But what's key is what are the resources required to use that. So what we have actually also done is to make it simple, is to also bring the entire application platform into the cloud. So that because, open source is very technical.
Right.
If you go into the community, you need to know a lot of technicalities and you need to build the capability around that. So what we have done is to make it very simple to create what we call an application development platform together with Amazon and together with Microsoft.
Wow.
Then these are delivered natively in their marketplace that allows any companies to build application easily using open source tools and using, what we call containers and microservices and DevOps, DevSecOps kind of methodology very quickly. And they can access them on this cloud providers. And that's very key because you see a lot of mid-sized to small-sized companies now actually building their application and their innovation on the cloud players because they do not have the size to compete with large enterprises who have their own IT department. So they depend a lot on the cloud providers. And the cloud providers kind of close the gap between the large corporation and the small corporation in terms of driving innovation. Right. So, but then, over the last, couple of years, what we call the trend around DevOps as well as Agile, it brings a lot more complexity around how do you build applications. And you require sometimes companies also to build out those technical skills. And what Red Hat has done is to make it simple into creating an application platform natively on Amazon and Microsoft so that even small companies can access to them and use them using pay-per-use kind of pricing model or pay-as-you-go kind of pricing model.
Yeah. Wow, that's really wonderful. I mean, I think that, it's just incredible the way technology has, for lack of a better word, democratized access to technology. Because previously, you really could only get your hands on a lot of these things if you were at an enterprise level. And you certainly could only customize them if you were at an enterprise level. So, what you're saying seems to be that really even a very small company can do this. They can access all this technology, they can customize it, they can really have that power to help them with their business.
Correct. And using the open source, development methodology, you can be a one-man show or a group of friends. You come up with an idea and you create it, but you have the community to access to actually help you build upon that idea, right? Because if not, in the past, you have to join a large company and be part of their research and development teams where they have thousands of people and they allow you to have the best machines in the world to build, software on. But now, firstly, you have access to the cloud, which provides pay-per-use kind of access to all this infrastructure and technology. Next, you have the open source community where you can leverage the strength and the power of the community and ideas to build upon the idea that you have. I mean, the world is so exciting these days, especially for software developers. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I'm just amazed when I see the huge amount of developments that come out literally every day and very exciting across a huge amount of uses. What might be next for Red Hat? Are there developments in the pipeline or are there potential new directions?
Yeah, so recently we just concluded our Red Hat Summit in Boston, and we made a couple of announcements. So Red Hat in the past, we have always been positioning what we call open hybrid cloud, and we were helping a lot of our customers modernize their application and modernize also the process of building applications so that they can build application faster and managing them faster. But a large piece of this application development in larger enterprise especially were done in their data centers and then slowly moving into the cloud. And I've shared earlier on around building that application platform now natively with Amazon and AWS. I think that's the first step in the midterm that we are helping a lot of companies because they are having challenges in terms of resources and hiring the people to also manage what we call the software platform that works with the infrastructure. But we want them to focus on building the application, not really worry about the platform, because the application is what differentiates every company on what they can offer, and they can build their business process and ideas into them. So that's step one, I would say in the near future.
Okay.
But and what we are also innovating and working with our customers on is extending that into what we call the edge, outside of the data center itself. So in the press release that we made, we are collaborating with General Motors to look into the next generation of future of what we call software-defined vehicles.
Wow.
And what does that mean? Is in-vehicle operating system. Because if you look at an automobile, it is what you call the edge because it's not connected, it's not part of the data center. It's not something that's always connected to the cloud or to your data center, but it's an edge device that's driving along in the road itself. And automotive companies are building software-defined cars these days. But how do you build the operating system that is a standard operating system across multiple different kind of platforms? And on top of that, then you can start building the additional application and what have you. But it's not an easy feat to achieve because there's a lot of consideration around safety, around security to ensure there's no hacking of your vehicle and things like that. But if you think about it, that kind of opens up into a huge opportunity in the future on what we call all this embedded system. So we have also launched a project in the community that we call MicroShift. MicroShift is a micro version of the industry leading platform, Kubernetes platform that we have, our application platform we call OpenShift. So MicroShift is now in the community. There's a community version that any developers can come in to play around with it, give us ideas of how and what's the best use cases for the use of it. But it's a mini micro version that can be used in all these edge devices, right?
Wow.
It could be anything out there. It could be a fridge. It could be just a drone or anything, so that it becomes a core way of developing application on top and being able to distribute it across to thousands, of devices at the same time. I think that's what's really, really exciting.
It's just incredible when you're explaining these things because you really do start to see the direction in which a lot of the products that we use every day are going. Like you said, these edge developments and, seeing how cars, as you're pointing out now, will be controlled by all of this software. It's things that a lot of us, myself included, hadn't really thought about.
Exactly. It's an interesting, exciting world, but sometimes we do think about it. Wow, all this software, and what if there are bugs in them, right? And that's kind of where open source is powerful, right? Because the source code is open, so of course, and you know what's happening in the source code itself. It's not closed that you do not know what's happening, and if there are raised vulnerabilities, attacks, everyone knows about it. And then immediately the community come together to solve those risks and those problems. And then Red Hat, of course, participate in that. And then we take the version and do more QA, and we actually provide a stable version on that. And what's exciting about this is kind of a standardizing, again, the operating system of edge devices. And once you do that, and then we also want to standardize the application platform so that you get a lot of developers building new functions and applications on top of it. It's a little bit like what Apple did with when they launched the iPhone, when they have the application app store where a lot of developers just build on top of that platform. So imagine now it's just not just Apple phones, but any devices out there, you are able to do things like that. And that will drive a lot of innovation from different people and different kinds of use cases, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for sharing so many interesting things. And, this is an area that I don't often get to explore. So it's really, it's really been great to learn from you and to start to see where a lot of technology is going, things that we're not thinking about because we're not working in that area ourselves every single day. And yet it does influence our lives, and it influences various aspects of how we may be running our businesses going forward. So it's just been great to learn from you.
Yeah. And one additional interesting I would just like to add as well. As we work with our customers around modernizing their tool chain of how they build application, what's very interesting is also that the customers do not just want to improve their tools. They also want to improve their process. At the same time, improve their culture. So what we've been doing a lot is to talk about the open culture that Red Hat has. And because we took the open source culture, it's part of the DNA within Red Hat itself. And we actually help that our customers also transform their culture into an open culture that embraces this entire idea of how do you build collaboration and communities and innovate together as a team and as a company, as groups of disparate teams across the world as well. So I think that was the very exciting thing that I've learned as well in Red Hat that's really powerful and also giving back to the world what we have enjoyed within the company itself.
Yeah, that is really exciting. And you can see that it will lead to a lot of future innovation. Now, where can people find you, Daniel? I think a lot of people would want to connect with you and would want to perhaps continue the conversation with you.
I'm in LinkedIn. You can connect with me in LinkedIn, and I'll do monitor, messages, and I do post once in a while when I have the time. And I would be more than happy to answer any question, I think, on your channel as well. If there's any questions that come through you, or they can connect with me directly on LinkedIn and have a conversation about open source, open, technology as even process and idea and culture.
Well, that would be great. I'm going to include that in the show notes and, of course, also over on our website at seatpodcast.com so that everyone will be able to connect with you. I thank you again for taking the time to talk today with us. I really think my entire audience has really learned a lot.
Thank you, Jane. I hope it's not too technical for everyone, but I'm listening to a podcast and it's really exciting. Even I think the last one that you had with about community about unmute, right?
Right.
And,
yes.
And when I was listening to it, and that's exactly what the open culture is about. In Red Hat, when I joined Red Hat, as a manager and open management, they say that never tell your employees that you represent them in a meeting. Give them the choice to be there. And that's really, really exciting.
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, thanks again for joining us. And I'm really looking forward to see what's coming next from Red Hat.
Thanks, Jane. And the pleasure is mine. And looking forward to talk to you again.
Thank you for tuning in to A Seat at the Table. If you enjoyed this episode or learned something from it, I'd love to hear about it. Your feedback powers this show. If you'd like to support the show, please hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Also, share episodes you found valuable on LinkedIn or other social media and call out your biggest insight or takeaway from the program. And don't forget to tag me, Jane Singer. I love seeing which episodes you liked best. And if you have time, please leave a review on any of the major podcast channels. Also, don't forget to check out our website, seatpodcast.com. That's SEAT podcast.com. You'll find all kinds of bonus content there, including free ebooks, discounts on apps and other products, as well as a preview of upcoming podcast episodes. You can also send a message with any thoughts, feedback, or suggestions there, and yes, I will read them. Thank you for joining me today and supporting the show. I'm Jane Singer, and I'll see you in our next episode of A Seat at the Table.